welcome to another episode of ScaleUp Sound Bites. I'm your host, Sam Elderfield, one of the founders here at ScaleUp. We're giving you some little nuggets of energy from the people in our community who we have worked with in the past and sort of networked with in the past. And I'd love to give you the information about how you guys can help you scale up your teams and your careers. Today, we are going to be talking to Roneel Muhammad, someone who I have known for a long time back in the day when he was working as an engineering manager at CBA, doing a bit of recruitment for him back then, and then have seen him go and move over to down to Melbourne and head up and join OpenTable as a director of engineering, which we're going to talk about today, and really look at how you guys can help scale up your team. And we're going to talk about inefficiencies in the hiring process and why a long hiring process can really impact your ability to close candidates to join your team, and what they experience firsthand in them losing out and missing out on talent, and then what they did to change this. So what we're going to do is really discuss and look at the sort of how they identified the bottlenecks in the interview process, how they were able to handle the internal stakeholders to remove these bottlenecks to allow for a quick hire, what the offer process looked like, and how they were able to move quickly to do so, and how that impacted their offer to acceptance ratio. So, Roneel, thanks, mate. Thank you so much for coming. And let's get started. How are you, mate?
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for having me here. I've been good. Yeah, it's good and stuff. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here to talk to you, Sam.
Oh, thank you, mate. Thank you very much. Means a lot. Means a lot. All right. So do you want to just run us through how it all started? Like, I guess the interview process of what you had at OpenTable and how it was impacting your ability to hire talent at the time.
Absolutely. So what I'll probably do is maybe start off with providing you context and then take it from there. So
Sure.
when I joined OpenTable, we had about 8 engineers in the Melbourne office, and we looked after one particular vertical, and so there was an appetite from the executive team to scale the Melbourne office, invest a lot more, especially during the COVID, when there was a massive, I think, competition and push to hire in other countries like this, San Francisco as an example, right? So we initially started with hiring a few people first, so they decided to test the waters, ended up giving us a few roles to hire initially. What we struggled with when we started doing that was, one, we were in direct competition with other companies out there, right? So this was post-COVID, when companies were, throwing money, and they were quite aggressively looking to hiring people, and there was a lot of push to hire as quickly as we possibly can.
Yep.
So what we found was our hiring processes had a lot to be desired. I mean, we were doing the whole stock standard of let's put the ad out, let's get our talent acquisition team to hire people, like interview people first. Then we do first round of interviews. We'd then do technical tests, second round of interviews, third round of interviews. In some cases we ended up doing like 5, potentially 6 rounds of interviews.
All right. Wow.
Some of the challenges we found was, one, people had a lot of options, right? So they really weren't sticking around for by the time we get to the fourth round, right? They weren't sticking around. They were accepting offers from other companies.
Yep.
The other thing that we found was that our expectation and standards that we were putting these candidates through was unrealistic. You know what I mean? Like, we had this high expectation of, we want this person, we want a unicorn that can do everything from coding to leadership to the whole works kind of thing. The other challenge we also found was we were it was costing us a lot more, because every role that is open for a long period of time, that just meant that we weren't getting team members in. We were losing out on potentially capitalizing on opportunities, right? So the initial set of people that we hired, we went through the whole process of inefficient hiring, and massive rounds of hiring as such. So that kind of got us thinking. Now, the challenge for us actually happened, and this is the context of it, right? Was when my team was given, I think, if memory serves me correct, close to about 10 roles to hire within a quarter. So the exec teams came up and said, "Look, you know what? Here's 10 roles. You've got a quarter to fill them in." We managed to get budget from somewhere else, And if you don't fill them in within this quarter, we'll have to then, move that budget somewhere else, and then you lose out.
Use it or lose it.
Lose exactly. Use it or lose it. So
Yeah, it happens all the time. Yep.
So that was an incentive for us to potentially hire 10, I think it was 10 to 12 roles. I don't remember, right? But it was a massive amount of roles to hire within 3 months. And it ranged from, senior engineers to mid-level engineers, iOS, Android, web engineers kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
fantastic.
we really, that kind of was a trigger for us to really reevaluate, one, what our hiring process was. Two, streamlining so we can actually hire quicker and then fill those roles, but do so without compromising on quality. You know what I mean? So that, and as I mentioned, that was the trigger for us, and then we did a few things. So I can talk about, I guess, a few things that we did to streamline our interview process, and then I'm happy with you to question me in each one. We can deep dive into that as we go along.
Yeah, sure.
So the first thing that we did, and I think this is very, very important, because this is something that we kind of realized that we were doing as well, and I think a lot of companies do this incorrectly as well. The first thing that we did was the engineers that was helping me interview, I got them all into a room together, and the first thing that we did was we had a discussion among ourselves and clarified exactly what we were looking for in the potential candidate. Right? Like what attributes do we want from these potential candidates? What roles are we looking to filling in? What's our expectation? What are some of the things we're willing to teach versus some of the expectation we have of candidates coming in? That helped a lot, right? Because as we were discussing, as we were talking amongst ourselves, we also challenged certain things. An example would be, for example, right? Like we one of the technology stacks we used was Kafka as an example. And we had a conversation amongst ourselves in terms of, do we really want to hire someone who's got intense experience with Kafka, or are we willing to hire someone who's got experience with, equivalent technology stacks and teach them, right? And this was, one of the examples of where we basically started making decisions around, all right, X, Y, and Z, no brainer. We have to have this experience, A, B, and C. We are willing to teach, and therefore, if someone doesn't have experience in this, it's not going to be a deal breaker for us. The other thing that we did, which helped tremendously, we taught, like we ran sort of training sessions for our engineers who were involved in the interview process, and taught them how to interview empathetically. So
Interesting.
and this was a massive improvement. I'll give you an example of what I mean, right? Sometimes when engineers go into interview, like I said, because we have such high as interviewers, right? We have such high unrealistic standards that we want candidates to reach. That we are very aggressive at marking candidates out. What we don't realize is that interview processes can be very, very stressful, especially for candidates who are probably out in the market, who really want this role and are afraid of screwing things up, right? Like that puts a lot of undue pressure on them. So they come into this interview, not necessarily being their best self, right? That they're under pressure, they're stressed out, they're nervous. They will fumble. They will actually, say things, which may not necessarily be the best, way of doing so. So for us, it was very important to, one, train our interviewers to be very empathetic. Two, we train them to, read body language. If is our candidates nervous, and if they are, what can you do to make them feel at ease? If you've asked a specific question, for example, and they're struggling to answer, can you reword the question differently to make it easier? If you're talking to them and then they're struggling to understand what you want, can you give them hints, right? Like there's nothing wrong with you giving them hints to say, no, this is what we're after. Talk to me about it. And even things like teaching them to have conversations rather than interrogation. You know what I mean? Like you're not there interrogating candidates. You're there conversing with them. You try to see if there's chemistry. You try to see if there's synergy. So that's something that we did, which helped a lot. And to some degree, it also made the interviewers, the engineers who were helping us interview, it made them appreciate the importance of being that person to help set the stage and create an environment where the candidate felt comfortable.
Yeah.
So that was another thing that we did. Again, massive improvement. It didn't help with the efficiency, but it actually helped take away the biasness, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Sometimes you go into an interview and if someone doesn't answer the question exactly like you wanted, you'd actually have your bias kick in, and you're like, well, this guy is not really good.
Yeah, interesting.
So anyway, those two were what we started off with. The third thing that we did, which again, it can be a little unorthodox, but the third thing that we did was we questioned as to why we needed 4 to 5 rounds of interviews.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
Like why? Like what will 5 rounds give us that potentially 2 rounds can't? And so we ended up reducing our interview sessions to just 2 rounds of interviews.
Yep.
Right? 3 rounds if we're on the fence and we just need to have one more conversation to convince ourselves. But more or less 2 rounds. Now this is how it worked. Actually, let me rephrase that, right? 2 rounds of official interview, but obviously, we had our talent acquisition team reach out and start the initial conversation. So if we take the initial conversation into play, that's technically speaking 3 rounds, right?
Sure.
So what the process was one, we'd get the resume, we'd go through it and we'd vet it. And then we'd give the yes or no to our talent acquisition team to say, look, this is a good candidate. Let's start the conversation. Let's have the conversation with this person. So what our talent acquisition team would do is they would reach out to the candidate and they would kick off the conversation, like get to know the candidate more, understand what the candidate was looking for, ask the basic fundamental questions, what's your salary expectations, what are some of the things you're looking for, what your career aspirations are long term, yada, yada, yada. This allowed two things, right? This allowed us to get a sense of whether or not it's worth kicking off the conversations with the candidate and taking it forward. But 2, it gave the talent acquisition team an opportunity to sell us. Now, I'm going to pivot very slightly just to talk about something which is close to me, which it's my opinion, by the way, right? Like you have to take it with a grain of salt. But one of the things that really frustrates me is when companies have this exaggerated sense of their self-worth. And then I'll try to explain to you what I mean about this, right? What happens is, candidates, when they apply to you, you go in there with this exaggerated sense that of your self-importance. And that causes you to look at the candidates, with the how do I say this, with low value, or you don't treat them with this as much respect as they deserve, and you end up having this cockiness about you when you interview them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
And what ends up happening there is you end up asking weird, stupid questions, which I think is no longer relevant. Questions like, "Why do you want to work for us?"
Yeah.
Now you have to take this with a grain of salt because this is just my opinion, right? But whenever we'd ask questions to candidates, the whole idea was, what's the purpose of this question? Like,
Yeah.
if you ask a question like, why do you want to work for us? What's the purpose? What is it that you're trying to ascertain? What is it that you're trying to get out of this? Yeah, sure. They can come up with some bullshit answer of, hey, you're a good company, you're doing this, and I've been following you, and but what
Tell you what you want to hear.
that's it, right? Like, will it give you the information you want to be able to make that decision? That was very, very important to us, right? So, for me, the whole idea was when we started the interview process with the candidates, we were very, very specific. Like, we were very clear about the kinds of questions we would ask. So, going back into this, right? Like going back into the whole process, the approach or these phases that we had with candidates, right? Phase after the talent acquisition person had that initial conversation, the first initial interview was an interview between me and our engineering manager with the candidate. And the interview was focused on behavioral questions. So behavioral questions, a bit of technical questions in there, obviously, but a lot of it was us getting a sense of whether this person, one, is going to be a really good cultural fit, cultural add to our team. 2, we wanted to ascertain uh, the past behavior of this person because that gave us confidence. Past behavior is a really good indication of future behavior. So we would ask questions about how they approach certain scenarios in the past, and that gave us a bit of an idea of whether or not this person would end up being a really good fit for us. We also, used that opportunity to ask a lot of questions or gave them a lot of situation in terms of, hey, how would you deal with this? Would you deal with that? If you had a situation where you had conflicts between other engineers, how would you deal with that, right? But the idea behind this initial interview was to get a sense of whether or not this is the kind of person we want in our team. This is the kind of person who would come and help us challenge things, would help us take our teams to the next level, would work very well with the other teams and actually have a sense of camaraderie, right? That was the main purpose behind it. But it also was an opportunity for us to sell ourselves. So part of what we did, for every question that we asked, we followed it up with context. All right, look, this is the reason we're asking you this question. This is the reason we're doing this, right? So an example would be, here's an example. Here's an example of a question. One of the questions I would ask is, let's say the scenario is you are given a particular problem and you're working with a seasoned engineer who's been with us, say, for 5-6 years. You both come up with different approaches to the problem. Your approach is A, his approach is B. And the engineer who's been with us is quite firm in his resolution. This is the way we'll do it. This is the reason why, and that's it. Now, that your approach, is the right approach to do this. What are some of the things that you'll do to convince the other engineer? How would you go about it? So on and so forth. And then we'll back it up with the context. Look, to give you context, we don't have difficult people, but we have strong opinionated engineers. We have engineers who've been with us for a long period of time. And we have engineers who probably are so comfortable with our systems that they are probably, opinionated in a particular approach. So back it up with context. Now, what we found with this process is, one, by the time we finished it, we had a really good sense of whether this candidate would be a good cultural fit or not.
Sure.
But at the same time, by the time the candidate left us, we left the candidate feeling eager to join us. We talked to the candidate about our career aspirations and growth. How do we support engineers? What are some of the projects that we'll be working with? The culture of the team, how we worked, and so on and so forth. But that kind of inspired the candidate to continue with us. Now, immediately after that, what we ended up doing was we'd send the candidate a technical exercise to take home.
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
Now, we debated about this. Like one option that we were thinking about is, how about we get the candidate to come in and do a whiteboarding session with us? Like that was something that was on the table.
Yep.
The other option was we give a candidate a timed exercise to do, and we basically say, right, you got an hour to complete this, and we see how good the candidate is able to do this under pressure. We looked at various options, and then we decided that we wanted to be very realistic about the way we gave the exercise to the candidate. Now, long term, when someone joins us, we're not going to sit there with a stopwatch. Okay, we're not going to sit there with a stopwatch timing you on how quickly you're able to get a particular solution out the door. I think that's unrealistic.
Yeah.
Secondly, I mean, in most cases, if we do go through a whiteboard session, there's no undue pressure in there, right? There's no pressure of, hey, we're observing you, we're monitoring you. If you screw up, we'll kind of question you, kind of thing. So those two scenarios we decided to not proceed with because they added undue pressure to the candidate.
Yeah.
They don't realistically give you what the candidate is capable of doing. So we decided to go with the whole process of, hey, here's an exercise that we'd like you to do. We split the exercise into two parts. One part was, here's a technical exercise, here's a problem statement, and we'd like you to implement a solution for it.
Cool.
The other part was, here's a particular project that we want to do. We'd like you to think about the architecture of that, and give us suggestions as to how you would go around architecting this solution, right?
Yep.
Then we give the candidate as much time as they needed. We know you've got a full-time job. We know you're probably a parent. You're probably quite busy. Take it home. Come back to us whenever you've done. Use whatever resources you've got. Google things up, whatever it may be, right?
Yep.
The idea was, we want you to be able to come up with a solution on your own and take away that unnecessary pressure of timing it. Once we got the solution back, our team reviewed it and we'd go through it, and then we'd come up with a series of questions to ask about the solution, right? And then we'd invite the candidate for a third round of interview. The second round of interview, my bad. Now, in this second round of interview, it was very, very technical. we'd get our senior engineers to be in that, and the focus was, on the solution that they gave to us. So we deep dive on the solution. Talk to us about your thought process. Why did you do it in this particular way? What are some of the challenges you think you would have faced if you had done it some other way? Or now that you've submitted it, if you had to refactor it, what would you go about doing it, right?
Yeah,
And then
sure,
we'd ask
sure.
very specific questions. So, hey, if the requirements changed, and we ended up giving this, how would you change your application? Or if we suddenly had a requirement to extend it, how would you go about expanding your application? Right. So it gave us an opportunity to ask very specific real world, give them real world scenarios and ask real world questions as
Yep,
such.
sure.
But it also gave us a bit of an idea as to what this candidate's thought process would be, right? How would they implement it? How would they go about this? Now, the main reason we did this and we ended up giving candidates as much time as they needed, um, two reasons, right? Like I said, take away the under pressure. But at the same time, what we were very keen on is the candidate's thought process. Like, what's your thought process? Why have you approached it this particular way? Why have you solved it in this particular manner? And if the requirements change, how would you tackle it differently? Uh, this gave the candidate an opportunity to take us through things. And honestly speaking, even if they made a mistake, if they came back and say, look, now that I had a chance to think about it, I would have done it differently. That's good enough for us, because that's generally what happens, right? In your day to day, you'll implement something, you'll submit it for code reviews, you get peer feedback, you have an opportunity
You make
to
mistakes.
tweak
Yeah.
it. That's it, right? That's it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's fine to make mistakes because you will have an opportunity to rework it. You'll have an
Yeah.
opportunity to improve it as you go along, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's the biggest mistake that we make sometimes is we just give them one opportunity, one chance to get it right, and if they don't, that's it. Off they
Yeah.
go, kind of thing. Now, here's some of the things that we did to ensure those 2 rounds were sufficient for us. Okay, let me start off by maybe talking about a thought process as we had. What we identified as part of the discussion is, regardless of how we interview people, there's no guarantee that this person would end up being the right fit. Okay,
Yeah.
and let me try and explain that or let me try and explain that. One, some people interview really, really well.
Yeah, sure.
Like some people are very exceptional at interviewing. They're extroverted. They have the gift of gab, but they may not necessarily be the best person for your team.
Mhm.
Some people are possibly introverted and they struggle with interviewing. They
Sure.
struggle
Heaps
under
happens
pressure.
heaps, especially with
it.
development. Yep.
Exactly.
Mm.
But that doesn't mean that they might be a bad fit for you, right?
Mhm.
So for us, the whole thing is, what can we do to improve the probability of getting the right person in the team? Okay,
Mhm.
regardless of whether the person is able to interview well or not. And so what we ended up doing was, like I said, one, we ended up making a list of what is it that we really need the candidate to have experience in, and what are some of the things we're willing to teach. The other thing that we did was we were very specific about the kinds of questions we were asking.
Yep.
Like I mentioned, if we ask this particular question, what is it that we hope to learn out of that?
Yep.
Okay. So it kind of forced us to get rid of unnecessarily questions that's out there. Why do you want to work for us? Why do you want to leave your existing stuff? Stuff like that. I'm not saying that those are really bad questions. I'm just saying that for us, we identified that they didn't have any relevance for us. Like
Do you have always have like a set amount of set questions to ask when you're preparing for the interview?
we did. So
Yep.
we had the base set of questions, but then we also gave our interviewers flexibility to pivot depending on how the interview was going.
For sure.
Because sometimes you'd ask one question that give you answers to the subsequent 2 questions after that, which
Yeah,
means
of course.
that it doesn't. Don't waste time asking them, just move on, kind of thing.
Yep.
But every question that we asked, there was a purpose behind it. Like, why is this question important? What is it that we want to get
Yeah.
out of it? And how will this help us make the decision whether this is the right candidate or not?
Yep.
The other thing that we did was to try and get away the subjectivity of this, right? We made a list of what is it that we were assessing and how do we rate the candidate. So example would be things like technical, cultural fit, ability to solve complex problems, critical thinking, working closely with other people, problem solving skills, whatever it may be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for each one, we decided on how to rate the candidate, and the rating was 1, 2, or 3. Okay, so 1 was literally, yep, not very good at this. 2 was on the fence. 3 was exceptional. Um, but the whole thing was we identified out of that which ones we were willing to teach. So if the person didn't have experience with working with Kafka, it's fine. It's just a technology stack. Okay,
Yeah.
we can teach it.
Yeah.
As long as this person has demonstrated in the past the ability to pick up new things and has demonstrated that in the past the person was quite proactive in learning things, it's okay. So if this person didn't have experience with Kafka, it's just a technology stack. We'll teach it. Every good engineer worth their weight in salt will be able to pick something up within a month. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
So that's another thing that we did. The other stuff that we did as part of this, which really helped us, was we didn't waste time. Immediately after the interview finished, we got everyone into the room and then we made a decision there and then.
Yeah, fantastic.
Like immediately. So, while it's still fresh, hey, everyone, we've just finished this interview. Let's get into a room. Let's go through it. Let's have a discussion. Let's make a decision. The decision is either no, yes, or actually, I'm on the fence. Let's get this candidate for a third round of interview. And if we get this candidate in for a third round of interview, these are the questions we're going to ask to get clarity on the things that we have concerns about. Okay?
And yeah, so what triggered that? So was it if there was one person said a yeah, like what was it, like a majority thing? Like how did that process go?
This and then this is the thing that we tried to do. Okay, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So the whole idea was we wanted everyone to say yes before we hired the candidate.
Yeah.
So if one person said no and everyone said yes, we gave the opportunity to the person who said no to justify his or her answer.
Mhm.
Why was it no? Like let's talk about it. Okay. Was it anything specific? Was it anything that the candidate said that made you a no? Now, the main reason we did this was it gave us an opportunity to, one, understand where this person was coming from, but it also gave us an opportunity for each one of us to jump in and clarify. So a really, really good example would be, one of the person would say, hey, look, we asked the candidate how they would deal with a conflict. And the candidate said something about this, and the candidate said, I'll escalate it to my manager. Okay. And therefore, I kind of feel like that's not the kind of person we want. We don't want someone who just comes in and escalates things. We want someone who'll be able to solve it themselves. But then, another engineer would jump in and say, no. To clarify, what this person said was he is not adverse to escalating it if it needs to, right? If it gets to the point where you're in an impasse and you can't make a decision, then we'll escalate it to someone who can help, break this. And so you get to a point where like, okay, no, that's actually a good thing. That's not a bad thing at all. Like, right? It's never
maybe there's just some breakdown in communication for what was actually said. Yeah.
That's it, right? So it gave us an opportunity to clarify things. It gave us an opportunity to say, no. This is what this person meant. And we'd have an opportunity to discuss. Now, if this person ended up being convinced and then we had majority vote or everyone said yes, we'd make the offer. Like we wouldn't wait. The idea behind this was, look, we can see 101 candidates, but the harsh reality is if we feel this candidate is the right fit, then why are we waiting? Let's make an offer.
The way, yeah, I love that.
What I mean?
Yeah.
And this is the example I gave to my team, right? To bring my point home. I gave two specific scenarios. One scenario was it's like dating, Sorry. Every third, fourth person that you date, it confuses you. It makes it harder for you to make a decision and be decisive. And the harsh reality is no one will be perfect. Very few candidates will be perfect and they'll check all the boxes. For us, the important thing was what are things that we don't want to compromise on? And if the candidate checks all of that, and if we have the ability to teach, let's just make the offer, right? The more candidates we interview, the more confusion we'll add, the more we'll run the risk of losing the candidate.
Yeah, absolutely, mate.
The other scenario which I gave to them, which I think helped a lot, was this. If we interviewed 3 other candidates and then we decided that candidate 1 was what we want to go with, and we went back and made the offer, and we found out that the candidate had already accepted the offer with somebody else, how disappointed would you be? And if the answer is, oh, I'm going to be really disappointed, then it's a no-brainer. Let's make the offer.
Yep.
I'm not going to be very disappointed. I think it'll be okay. I won't lose sleep over it. Okay, cool. In that case, that's not the right candidate for us. Because if you are going to be very disappointed, if that candidate ended up taking another offer,
Mm.
then that's a very good indication. That's the right, fit for us. Let's just make a decision, very, very quickly.
Yep.
So our conversation would always be, why can't we make a decision right now to make the offer to the candidate? And this helped us get rid of the subjectivity. It helped us not be on the fence anymore, and it forced my engineers to be very specific about the question they were asking, because they were now responsible for making the decision about, an addition to the team. It took away the whole thing about, let's just move on and see what happens, or let's just continue, interviewing other candidates. But it also forced us to be very, um, I think, very aggressive about why is it that we can't make a decision in just 2 rounds of interviews.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. So it gave me clarity of being able to do that, which is, such a fantastic thing. So just to recap, I think like going through that whole process, you were able to reduce the interview process down from 5 to 2 essential rounds, sort of 2.5 with technical tests thrown in there. And what you allowed us to do was really look at those 2 interviews and give the skills and tools to the people who are in those interviews to interview better. So
Yes.
looking at empathy, looking at removing those biases, having structure to interview questions to do so, which I think is like super important and allow us to do that. Because, I think when interviews go in and they are a bit unstructured, it does add a lot to bias, because you kind of like tend to ask questions that they're not answering to what you want to hear. Like
Exactly.
we talked about before, you're like, oh, it's not going to be right. Well, you don't know. You don't actually really know. I think the first step as well was really important, was look for people with, good quality skills that, or talent, but if they don't have the necessarily skills, they can learn them. Like a lot of the tools that you're talking, like Kafka, you gave a good example of. I see it with frameworks with JavaScript all the time. Is like, if like someone is a real good JavaScript developer, and if it's a new framework or something like that, oh no, they need to have it. So, well, do they really need to have it? Like,
That's it.
You got to pick it up. Like, yeah.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And for us, look, I think it's very important, okay, when you hire someone to have a long-term vision, right? So whenever we hire someone in my team, for example, right, my expectation is this person will be with us for at least 3 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the main reason I have that expectation is, one, we, like, as a leader, I work very hard to make sure that the candidate or whoever's in my team is given the opportunity to grow, learn, upskill themselves. Okay.
Mhm.
And so the whole thing is, if I'm going to be doing this, and we're going to have someone with us for, say, 3 years, and we're going to retain this member in my team for 3 years at least, then a month for them to pick up new skills and learn is very insignificant when you look at the large timeline.
Mhm.
And that, because we do this, it makes it easier for us to say that's fine. We can teach certain things. And the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is, more often than not, candidates have to give a month's notice.
Yeah.
There's nothing for you. It's not unheard of, or it's quite acceptable, rather, for you to be able to go to a candidate and say, hey, we'd like to make you an offer, but one of the tools that we use quite significantly in our day-to-day is Kafka, and you don't have much experience with it. What we'd love you to be able to do is, in that month that you have before you join us, here's some of the things we'd recommend for you to do to read up on that.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
Exactly. So when you do join us, you can hit the ground running, and you're not, thrown in the deep end, with an anchor tied around your legs.
It's a great tool. Great tool.
Yeah.
All right, mate. I'm a bit conscious of time. With what we've got here, and one question that sort of is burning: were you able to fill those roles?
Yes.
The 10 minutes all in that time. Yeah, due to this interview process.
We did. Look, I'm
Yeah,
proud to say we filled all the roles.
Yeah.
And everyone
have
that
to lose
we
it.
hired. No, and that's the thing, right? Everyone that we hired, to be honest, we were very, very happy with.
Yeah.
In fact, some of the people that we hired, they didn't do really well in the interview at all. But because we didn't have biasness, we ended up making the offer, and they surprised us. We were very pleasantly surprised at their attitude, the culture, the amount of stuff that they were able to do in a very short span of time.
Yeah.
And that kind of reinforced the fact that not everyone interviews well.
No.
I think that's something that we have to be very conscious of.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point. So I think like, yeah, it's just if you've got that hindsight, no, not hindsight, but I guess openness to or empathy to understand that not every interviews well, but you've got a good process that you can trust, and have that sort of collective thought of making a decision at the end. If they've gone through that process and done the things and ticked the boxes, well, then you can pull the trigger confidently,
That's it.
and then allow yourself to go with it, knowing you made the right decision.
That's the thing. And look, once you acknowledge the fact that it's there's no guarantee,
There
okay?
is no guarantee.
There's no guarantee. I think once you've acknowledged that fact, it makes it easier for you to make a decision.
Yeah.
A lot of times we end up with paralysis analysis, right? Like, or analysis paralysis rather, where we're trying to really increase the probability of us making the right decision and increasing that confidence. And sometimes you have to trust your gut. Like you have to. Sometimes, as long as you've got everything in place to be able to give you a high vote of confidence, it boils down to gut feel.
Yeah. So if they're able to, so if they're able to pass, get through that behavioral-based interview process at the start, they've both of you guys have made a decision of them joining, and they'll fit in well with the culture, and the company could be right for them. That gets out of the way in the first step process. They go home, they complete that technical assessment in their own time. They come back and they book in the second stage interview, which is sounds like a quite grueling technical interview, but also the ability for them to talk through their code and sort of answer questions and allow them to, if they could make changes, what they would do, and so explain and walk through it. Similar to like, duplicating that in the working environment, which sounds quite ideal when you're looking to hire someone to work for you and your team.
Yeah, I mean, and then here's the thing, right? If we're not going to give them a particular problem, when they're working with us, and we're not going to subject them to a particular, kinds of working, then why do we do this in an interview? You know what I mean?
No.
Like, why are we timing things in interviews, or why are we giving them stupid, here's an algorithm that you need to write to solve this weird problem that you're not going to solve ever for us, So I think it just takes away that ability for you to be able to ascertain whether this person will be a good fit for you long term.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's it's a very great ideal way of doing it, because you do see a lot of candidates throw up that meme on LinkedIn where it's like the interview process being Godzilla, and then the job is like, you're coming up against Godzilla, and then the job is like you're wrestling a teddy bear.
That's it, right? And the thing is, like not in a bad way. I'm not saying that we didn't have complicated problems to solve. Don't get me wrong, we did, right?
Yeah.
But a really bad example would be, sometimes I'd go into a particular interview in the back of the day, right? And then they'd have weird questions like, how would you calculate the amount of windows in a particular building, this high, this wide, whatever it may be, right? That's a very bad example.
Yep.
Like those kind of scenarios would never be seen in your day to day in a work environment.
Yeah.
Instead, we give them things like one of the questions I love asking, okay, is this. You have an application, data-driven application with this particular database. This is how the architecture is. I draw it up as well. And like, this is the architecture that we've got. And then, one day you find that your application is running very, very slow. Just talk to me about what are some of the things that you do to try and figure out where the slowness is, where the bottleneck might be. Talk to me about how you would go through the flow and determine where the issues might be. And then, in your experience, what are some of the stuff that you've identified that has been issues in scenarios like this, right? Give them scenarios like that, because those are what they will do day to day. Our applications will run slow, and then you have to go through and try and figure it out. That's something they'll do, quite often with us. Well, that's the scenario that I'll give you during the interview process.
Seems pretty simple, right? Why overcomplicate it? Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It is very, very simple.
All right, Roneel, thank you so much for your time and being vulnerable enough to share that process. And I think a lot of people, where they're sort of contemplating and looking at, if they're realizing they're losing candidates through the process and the interview process, they could really look at using this as a template. And the proof is in the pudding of you guys being able to scale the team quite quickly.
No, absolutely. And look, I really appreciate this, Sam. I know I've spoken a lot, but I'm really hoping the viewers get some nuggets. And then, like I said right at the very beginning, okay, this is just my opinion, the way we did it, and then what worked for us.
Yep.
It's not a silver bullet. Okay, some things that we do are probably not the right things anyway. So
Sure.
take it with a grain of salt. But if you can get something out of what we do and it works for you, oh, that'll be freaking awesome.
All right. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, mate.
Thank you so much, Sam. I really appreciate it.